Learn how to build a better sign and print shop from a few crusty sign guys who've made more mistakes than they care to admit. Conversations and advice on pricing, sales, marketing, workflow, growth, and more. You're listening to the Better Sign Shop Podcast with your hosts, Peter Kourounis, Mike O'Reilly, and Bryant Gillespie.
Before we jump into the episode, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsor, GCI Digital Imaging, grand format printer to the trade. We talk a lot about outsourcing on the podcast and the importance of having good partners, and GCI Digital Imaging is a good partner to have. Owner TJ Bedact and his team focus on providing killer customer service just the way grandmother used to make it. If you're interested in learning their approach to business, hop back into the archives to episode 9, where the guys and I interview TJ about customer experience. So if you're looking for a high quality trade printer for banners, wraps, and other printed graphics that your customers throw at you, check out GCI Digital Imaging at printgci.com. Welcome to the next edition of the Better Sign Shop Podcast. As always, I've got co-hosts Peter Kourounis, the Sign Shop Yoda, and Mike, the Sign Shop Samurai, Mike O'Reilly. Do you like that one? Is that better?
Hey, it's better than the Sign Shop Chimichanga. Definitely. It's a step in the right direction.
Can we see like a samurai move or something?
I think we can do better.
Where's your sword at? There you go. Look at him. Like a champ.
I have a ruler. Anything for the audience.
Yeah. So you guys seem thrilled. Very excited today. You should be, though.
I'm excited to be here.
An extra special guest, which we'll tell you about in just a moment. But before we dive in, what's new with you guys? What's the scoop? Pete, how goes the sale?
Status quo. I told my employees last night. It was an emotional moment. Yeah, I buttered them up with like pizza and beer. And they're like, hey, what are we doing here? We're talking about I started talking about the end of the year and where we are as a team and how we kicked ass this year. And then I just threw the hammer down. I'm like, all right, so I'm no longer your owner. And in the most theatrical way, if you could close your eyes and imagine how this happened, it was not scripted. It was not planned. The guy was just late. It was a 5:00 in the evening meeting. He came at 5:15 and walked in the door. And I'm like, and there's your new owner, just like that. As he walked in the door, I'm like, that could not have actually worked out better, but it was maybe more of a grand gesture or a grand entrance, if you will, something I wasn't really planning for. But it went over really well. He's a really nice guy. He's committed. He's right now in the franchise does a mentorship program. So you get a little bit of a training in 2 weeks in training in their headquarters. And then prior to that training, you get to shadow a local franchise owner. So he's kind of involved in that weekly shadowing right now. But they really do a really great job of just prepping a new owner to come in for a smoother transition. They're not just bringing somebody in that's just got deep pockets and a good credit score. So it's nice to get somebody that's going to be the owner, that's going to be familiar with their systems, familiar with, the process, because they went through that mentorship program and also, their foundations training as well. So it's going to be nice.
Yeah.
We're excited.
So are you feeling bittersweet about it or what?
Last night the emotions were a little tough on me, as I said to you guys on our last episode, this is it for me in the sign business. My calling is now helping sign shop owners achieve operational excellence. I've achieved that twice. I don't want to go through it again. I'm going to miss, I'm going to miss a couple of pieces of it, as you guys know, but it was a little emotional for me last night to finally say goodbye and let everybody know.
Did you tear up?
Oh yeah. I mean, forever and a day, the sign shop's like your first, it's not your first child. Since I've had a child, I can't honestly say that in good faith, but it's like your first love. It's tough to walk away from something that you've known for all of these years. But the grass is greener on the other side as long as you have a plan. I have a plan, and the Better Sign Shop and what we're doing here is part of that plan. So I'm really excited for what we're doing and the people that we're talking to, and the feedback and the encouragement continues to get better and better.
How hard do you think he cried, Mike? Scale of 1 to 10.
Oh,
like a
13.
Like a full sob.
Yeah, just ugly cried like a baby.
I think I would have too, honestly. I can remember the final goodbye at the old shop. It was definitely like a bittersweet moment and teared up a little bit.
Interestingly, when I sold my shop, I did not cry. I danced out the door. And promptly I threw my watch away. That was kind of like my celebratory thing. I just threw a very expensive watch in the trash can as I walked out of my attorney's office and said no more.
So was that at the end of your buyout or your earn out type of hey, teach them how to do the business part of it? Or was that when you first got the check?
Oh yeah, no, when I first got the check and walked out of the closing.
But you were crying at the end of the other.
Yeah.
It's probably hey, this is over with finally. Tears of joy.
Yeah. Tears of joy at that point. Yeah. No, it's a good feeling when you finally close on the sale and you get a sense of accomplishment for what you worked for so long. So I'm happy for you, Peter.
Thank you, Mike. But that's exactly what it feels like. I'm actually kind of surprised to hear somebody else would have an emotion of just dancing out the door. I just don't have that same feeling. But it is an accomplishment, and that's how. If there's anybody that's out there that's ever sold a business, they know. It's a time to celebrate. It's a time to celebrate the achievement and pass it on to somebody else that's going to reap some of those benefits that I've reaped that I've obtained throughout the years.
I'm glad you corrected, Duke, because I didn't know. I didn't know how to respond there. I could get my 9-year-old in here, but she's at school. She made me take a spelling test the other day. That was part of her homework, was to give me a spelling test. And I think I missed 3 or 4 because she was just mumbling the whole time like this. Worthwhile. All right, so who have we got today? Right?
What do we got going on today?
Dan Antonelli, industry legend, wrote not 1, but 2 books on branding. So we're super excited to have him on.
Yeah.
It should be an interesting conversation. I could say that I've went through the newest book. I've got quite a few questions about it. Definitely some strong language in there targeted at sign shops or educating small business owners and home service brands on how to deal with sign shops. So I think that'll make for an interesting conversation. We'll see how it goes. Guys, we have Dan Antonelli joining us on the podcast. We've been looking forward to this one for a long time. He really needs no introduction. Dan from KickCharge, welcome aboard.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you guys.
Welcome, Dan.
All right, so Dan has a new book that came out in the last couple months, Branded, Not Blanded. Tell us a little about the book, Dan.
So the book is really meant to be a resource for both home service company owners and for designers alike. In it, I really just wanted to spell out sort of how a home service business should be utilizing a brand, how they create a brand, what are the important aspects of how to build a really successful and disruptive brand for their home service company. We talk a lot about the fundamentals for everything from naming to color to consumer psychology. And of course, a fair amount is discussed about effective wrap design and what goes into those effective wrap designs. So we sort of lay out kind of a blueprint as far as here's the things you should know about branding home service companies. Here's tips that you can use. Here's what not to do. Here's what you should be doing. And so if you're working with a designer, certainly it's a good resource so you can go into that process a lot more educated. And then if you are a designer, certainly learning more about the psychology behind branding and how that plays such a role in what you're designing for that home service business, how it needs to live and breathe, obviously, in that outdoor environment. and making sure that you understand the logic behind branding. And I think that for me, that was something that, there's a lot of books on branding, and a lot of books are more sort of pie in the sky stuff and not real kind of nuts and bolts stuff. And there isn't really a strong focus on, obviously, home service branding as a very specific niche. So I wanted to really have that resource out there that, you know what, like, this will give you a really good understanding of how this works. And even simple things, like even just like remembering that for a home service company, primarily your audience is actually a woman. She's making 75 to 80% of the original phone calls to that home service contractor. And so we talk a lot about how you design brands that actually appeal to women, and making sure the mindset is there for that home service owner to recognize that it's almost not as important as to what they like. It's really more important to what Mrs. Jones likes and what will appeal to her, and how these brands help diffuse bias and stereotypes that they have against contractors. And that's really, it's kind of interesting because it's almost like,
It's definitely super interesting to me.
There's a song by Suicidal Tendencies called Subliminal. I don't know if I may be dating myself with that song, but you sort of think about what it is that we're doing, and all brands are really trying to do is control what someone feels about you. Ultimately, they make that decision, but we're going to do everything in our power to put an image in front of her that will have her believe something about the experience she may get if she chooses to hire you. So you're talking, a much deeper level than just, hey, it's a really cool truck wrap, or hey, it's got cool graphics. It's more about, well, again, what will she feel about having you come to her home? So controlling what she may feel, the emotions, connecting with her before you ring the doorbell is all that we're trying to basically control as best we can.
100%. I that definitely tracks with me. Like, my wife makes at least 80% of the decisions in the household.
Yeah.
And Mike, how about you, man? You're newly married. Does that track with you or no?
Well, I'm the one that does all this work in my house, so we don't really call a lot of contractors. But no, it totally does. And I see trucks going down the road for contractors and service providers all the time, and I see graphics that are very almost angry and aggressive and like
we talk about that too.
Barbed wire. And right. I always wonder, like, what do you like? I don't want that in front of my house. I wouldn't feel comfortable with this person in my house with my wife alone. Like, it's very mean, angry, aggressive, clearly trying to portray something about the owner's personality type of rap that doesn't really say anything about their actual business or the service they're going to provide, or giving you any level of comfort at all. And it's interesting. I don't think a lot of people really think that through.
Yeah, because they think it should be cool to them.
Right.
It's always about what the look owner at this wants. Dude, he's all muscled, and I'm like, yeah. So the running guy holding the wrench, looking like he's going to beat the shit out of you. It's not exactly endearing to Mrs. Jones. Like, Mrs. Jones is already scared shitless about who's coming to her home. Let's not make her feel even more scared by the muscled guy holding the wrench, running towards you and looking super aggressive. So you think, certainly we talk a lot about that part in the book. And then we just talk about how the brands themselves really are designed in a way to try to make it more sticky in that homeowner's mind, right? So the repetition of the vehicles and the impressions that they see of those vehicles in those communities are not, and this is where people think that truck wraps are supposed to be calls to action, and they're not. They're really meant to be brand building exercises. There may be an instance where someone's driving behind you and they're like, oh my God, I need to get my electrical work done. And maybe they call at that point, but it's really meant to be when they are actually ready for service, they remember the name of the company that they've seen, right? So
pops right in their head.
Yeah. So the idea of winning on the streets translates to winning online, because if I can get that name to be memorable and I can get that consumer to remember the name when they need service, now they're talking, now they're typing into Google a branded search term for a branded name. So you're no longer competing to be number one for electricians near me. You're competing with yourself because they're only typing in your name at that point. And that's where we really see, again, some crazy stats and results for people that we've rebranded as far as what happens with organic branded keyword searches versus the prior period of time. So if I can get it sticky and they see that truck on that neighbor's driveway and then they see it on another neighbor's driveway, and then it's 3 months later and they're like, oh, what was that cool truck that I saw that my neighbor was using? Oh yeah, that was, and then the name sticky, and then they just type that into Google. So you win online when you can build that effective brand out on the streets. And I think people really forget that part of it too. And they think, oh my God, like that's why we got to put the phone number so big because they're going to be calling me right away when they see the truck. And it's like half the stuff we're putting on the streets today don't even have a phone number because it's not the mechanism that people actually take to contact you. Most of them are going to Google the name of your company because it's much easier to Google that and get the phone number from that than to try to remember a random set of 7-digit numbers or 9, whatever digits they are. Yeah.
Let me ask you this: like, when you're working with a home service brand, do you have like a boilerplate, like a script, like, hey, if they mention phone number and making it larger, like here's like the playbook? Because I used to print like a lot of T-shirts in our old shop, in addition to wraps and other things. And like my pet peeve, like every service company that we ever worked with, like on their shirts, small logo on the front with the phone number, big logo on the back with the phone number and the website. And it was like the bane of our existence. And I'm like,
we shoot that stuff down pretty quick, especially the phone numbers on T-shirts when we do a lot of uniform design. And I'm like, when was the last time you actually took the phone number off the back of somebody? Like you're going to be waiting in line in Walmart and like, oh yeah, let me just call this guy up. Like, so yeah, we shoot that stuff down very quickly. We often say the bigger the phone number, the weaker your brand is. And you see that often where you see somebody's got a huge phone number. I want them to be able to call me. And, it's a crutch is really what it is, because if you have a great brand name and a memorable image, the phone number almost becomes irrelevant because Google puts it in front of them if it's done correctly. So we always say website is more important than phone. So if we're talking about priority, we try to make sure that definitely a website is included. Sometimes the phone number is included. I mean, listen, we still put phone numbers on there, and I'm not opposed to putting a phone number on there, just so long as it doesn't come at the expense of the brand. Okay, because again, the likelihood of someone remembering those digits and those actual numbers, it's more likely that they will remember the brand name, and then Siri and your smartphone is going to deliver the phone number to them. So I'm not really that worried. Oh my God, they're not going to figure out how to contact me. Well, if you got a shitty brand, yeah, they probably won't be able to figure out how to contact you. But
So Dan, I'm a little biased here, so I'm going to just step in and ask you a question that just kind of came to mind. What would your philosophy be for those brands that are out there? I'm not going to name a couple, 1-800-plumber, for their name that their branding is actually the number that they use, 1-800-water damage, 1-800-got-junk. Now, how would your strategy alter for brands like that?
See, yeah, so that's a different set of circumstances because the brand name is the phone number. So you can't really obviously not put the brand name on there, and the brand name is the phone number. And we've done a few that have that type of naming. But again, now it's like making sure that that element is done in a way that I can remember that. And of course, I presume that your .com matches the actual phone number and things like that. So that's certainly a little more unique scenario where you have a phone number that has the actual name of the company in it at that point. So that's okay. I wouldn't tell you not to put that on your truck at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I actually do have a follow-up question, and I realize I may be getting into a little bit more, but you were talking a little bit about your philosophy and how you immediately shoot things down. So I do think it's relevant. But what would you do in instances? And I've read through this book. I've as I told you offline, I've sent this to a couple of my colleagues as well. And what would you do for brands that don't necessarily have like that? I noticed, I don't know what you would call it in your business, but I guess you have like icons, you have like figurines, characters that really like are what's generating that buzz. You see that primarily. What would you do for a brand that doesn't have that, or doesn't have a mascot or a logo or an icon like that?
Yeah, so
How
I mean,
would your design strategy alter?
Yeah, we do a lot that are icon based as well. And you try to develop an icon that is unique, that is eye catching, that is memorable. And you think, obviously there's a lot of big companies that go with a more icon based strategy. So it's more about, again, making sure that every time they see that symbol, that they associate that symbol with your brand. And the way that that happens is just repetition over time, So thinking about a symbol, if there's a way that that symbol can help communicate the nature of the business, that's obviously a plus. If there's a way that the symbol can also help communicate something unique in terms of the visuals. So whether it's color, whether it's just something that obviously looks different and well thought out. So like if you're looking at HVAC as an example of something where they tend to actually try to use a lot of symbols, and it's actually a bad idea, but you see a lot of red and blue arrows. You see a lot of snowflakes and suns, right? And because we do heating and cooling, let's have a snowflake and a sun. And the real problem with that is now you're talking about symbols and icons and graphics that you can't even own. You can associate those symbols and graphics maybe with the idea that you provide heating and cooling, but there isn't a compelling reason for me to look at those symbols and specifically identify them with your own unique brand. So those are why we typically try to avoid some of those types of approaches as well, because I can't own it. Why would I put a brand out on the street that you can't own in your space or have potentially be associated with someone else? And that's why we're sort of down on white vans, because white vans by themselves are very challenging even to own as a brand strategy. So why would that white van stand out to me as something that would be memorable when there's 1,000 other white vans that are already out there in my market? So, common colors, red, white, and blue, colors we typically want to avoid at all costs if we can do it, if it makes sense to do it. But I certainly don't want to put a red, white, and blue brand in a market that's saturated with 5 other red, white, and blue vans and red, white, and blue brands. You also look at the fact that even like red, white, and blue as a unique color palette is not really ownable by any business because it's associated with Americana. It's associated with so many other things. So why would I put a brand out that as soon as I see red, white, and blue, I'm actually associating with something that's unrelated to you, right? So we try to look at that and say, can we think of a unique set of colors that no one else in your market is using, that no one else associates with a different brand? So that's the other part of the color theory that really comes into practice in what we do.
I think that's overlooked as well, right? Like the color side of branding and not just like the logo.
Yeah. The more unique you can go in that space, the better. And I think that's one thing I think we really pride ourselves is we have like a lot of weird color combinations where people like, I never would have thought that those 3 colors would even make sense to put together. And we spend a lot of time on that, but that's very intentional that we do that because we want that to be ownable. We want it every time you see this, maybe whatever if it's purple and processed blue, like I want only the consumer to think about your brand when they see those colors, not think about other things unrelated to your company.
Yeah. How do you feel about purple and hot pink?
Purple and hot pink is ownable though, like who else is doing it?
Yeah, that's 100%. Like the previous iteration of Better Sign Shop, I think it was like Ink Sauce was the name of it. And I like had like some blues, like the tried and true, like trustful blue. And like, the message got lost. And, with this one, I was like, I don't know if I was listening to too much like techno synthwave music late at night when I was putting this together or not, but it definitely came out like a retro, in your face, you're either gonna love it or hate it, bright pink. What did you call it, Mike? You was like Miami Vice, like cocaine style or something. You said.
Yeah, exactly what it was.
That's awesome.
So Dan, let's put ourselves in our listeners here are sign shop owners, right? And obviously in your book, I mean, you have some choice advice for sign shop owners and the sign industry at large. In an average sign shop, a guy comes in, he's got an HVAC company, he wants a wrap, and he's had a logo for a long time, and it's an aggressive, muscly guy on an American flag background with like barbed wire wrapped around him or some stupid shit like that.
Yeah.
We've all been there. Most sign shops are very hesitant to push back on a customer and say, your logo is awful, dude. You just can't do this. How do you get to a point where you're able to overcome those objections, or at least that internal fear of pushing back on a customer and saying, hey, listen, your ideas just aren't good, and why don't you let us do what we do best? We've all had to use that shitty logo and try and make lemonade out of, rotten lemons. The result's never good, and like you said, it never works for the customer. And the second that van leaves your shop, it's not going to generate any new revenue, any new leads for that customer. How do you get better at that as a sign shop owner?
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. So we are certainly blessed with the fact that people who come to us, the vast majority of them already know. Like, they've already sort of read enough, or have listened to me speak, or have seen the results that we've garnered for other companies. And so they're already at the idea of saying, I need a rebrand, right? For the ones who aren't, because again, we'll probably get about 20 inquiries a week of people requesting to work with us, right? Through the website. And out of the 20, there's a good amount of them that say, we love your truck wraps. We love your designs. We want you to design our truck. And we say, okay, well, generally speaking, we almost never design for people that we haven't branded first. But sometimes we do. Like, sometimes someone actually has something good. Like, it is possible that someone has a good logo, right? So we'll ask them to send it to us, and then I'll do an evaluation at that point. So I'll say, listen, like, what you have will never work or be effective for this medium. Here's why. And I'll lay out sort of the case as to why this isn't going to work. Now, at that point, we'll say you have two options with KickCharge, right? So your option is, let us redesign it and let us do it correctly, or we can't work with you. And that's, really up to you. Obviously, whatever you want to do is totally fine, but I will not take your money for something that I know will not work. Now, does every sign shop have that luxury to just say, hey, you know what, your logo sucks, I'm not working with it, see you later? Well, no, they don't. But let me say one thing about telling someone no and then backing it up with logic is that a lot of times they tell us, well, you're the first person to tell us that. How come no one else told me that? The silkscreen guy didn't tell me that. My last wrap guy didn't tell me that. And I said, well, sometimes they're not qualified to actually tell you that, right? And then sometimes they're just set up to print stuff, and that's all they're really interested in. I'm not really interested in doing that. I'm interested in building something that's going to grow and expand your business. And I'm also not interested in wasting your money. So it's a very different kind of mindset. And I think it's horrible sometimes, some of the stuff that is put out there, and that responsibility for whoever is designing it is not respected more, is not given more thought. And so, again, certain shops, their whole business model is based on generating, just printing volume. Like, we want to print stuff. That's fine. But you have to accept the fact that you're playing with somebody's livelihood, and you, to me, better know what you're doing. If you're taking money for something that people are trusting you to know your craft and to know, the logic behind what you're designing, you just better know what you're doing. So that part, to me, frustrates me a little bit when you drive down the highway and you see so many things that are destined to fail, that will never generate work for that particular company and never deliver brand promise. Whether or not they're legible is even another issue. Like, we don't even have the fundamentals down as far as, can we even read the name, the phone number, or even discern what it is that they do. So there's a lot of challenges with that. But, again, to your point, Michael, not everyone really has the luxury to say, I'm not working with it. But can we say, I can improve it. I can fix some of the flaws in this. But you have to establish the credibility to have them trust you. And that part is also something where you see guys struggle with, and owners struggle with, because they're not doing a good enough job of instilling the confidence for that customer to believe that they can actually solve their problems. So why is that? Well, you walk in their shop and their own shop branding is a mess, right? There's stuff that's all different. The website's different. The homepage is different. The Facebook page is different. So like they're not even practicing the idea of being branded themselves. So why would I think that you can solve my branding problems when I look at your brand and I'm like, this thing's a mess. Like everything's different in this shop. The waiting room is not branded properly. The wall wraps are not done. Like, so there's a lot of it is almost sort of self-inflicted because they don't instill the confidence that contractor is looking to get from themselves. If they can get a clear picture of, wow, these guys really have their shit together. And the other part too is marketing design in a way that makes them feel comfortable with those decisions. So what results have you got? And there's shops that do good work. They just don't market the results that they actually get for the companies that.
Yeah, this was I had this at the top of my list, and that was like,
This is on the top of
out of everything that you guys, everything that you guys do. I even going back to like the last book, building a big small business brand. Everything that you talk about has like an ROI that is clearly attached to it. Like, hey, we don't want to work with you unless we're guaranteeing you an ROI on what you spend with us, because it's an investment. It's not a good vehicle wrap is not an expense, it's an investment. Or a good brand is not an expense, it's an investment. And I love the way that you, like throughout the book and even online, like you guys touch on that side of it. Like, hey, I know if I go and spend X with Dan and his team at KickCharge, like that's going to come back to me. Out of all the shops that I've talked to, like nobody does that. And like a lot of it kind of goes back to like just being order takers or actually like a consultative sales process. He talks a lot about that on this call, like our podcast, and also on some of our mastermind calls. But like understanding what they're trying to get to is more important than if somebody comes to you with a banner. Like, hey, why do they need the banner? Maybe they don't need a banner at all. Yeah.
And certainly we talk a lot in the book, and we talk even to the customers about the idea of personifying what it is that they actually deliver. So we have a lot of contractors that come to us who perform a great service, right? They get inside the home and they kill it. They have the best practices down to a science as far as how they interact with the homeowner, how they wear the booties, they lay out the red carpet in the front. They do everything really well once they're inside the home. So by the time they leave, the homeowner feels good about that decision. The problem is most of these guys don't look like they do that, right? So if I can match up the service that they actually provide with a brand that communicates that, then that's the home run. Then that's the blueprint. Like that's how these guys win it. And the other part too is you're talking about, well, how do you convince them about this? You start talking to them about average tickets, right? You start talking about, because average tickets is hammered home so much through home service. How do we increase our average tickets, right? And guys hit this wall about how much they can charge for their work. And the problem that they run into is they just don't look like they should be charging as much as they're trying to get, right? So if I show up in a premium brand, uniform, the truck looks amazing, all my other externals are delivering that brand promise. As the consumer, I already expect to pay a premium for that. I already expect that you're not going to be the cheapest guy. Okay. So when you start talking to someone who's coming in with, again, maybe a really poor brand, maybe one that's super aggressive, can we speak to them about the idea of how a more polished brand actually will help their average tickets? We have a client in Jacksonville, Florida that we rebranded like 4 years ago. And you could take inflation into account a little bit, but their average ticket 4 years ago was under $6,000. And now their average ticket is over $12,000. Well, how did that happen? Now, of course, inflation and, HVAC equipment went higher, right? I get that. But now they look like a premium-based home service provider. And as the homeowner, I'm willing to pay more for that. So when you can, again, now, does it seem expensive how much they paid us to rebrand them in the scale of things? No, like no one goes through the process and at the end of it, they're like, oh my God, this was a waste of money. It's always like, oh, it makes me sort of feel a little bit bad, but they're always like, you should be charging more money. But when you start talking to them about the benefits of investing in this, and the other hidden benefit too that is not talked about is the cultural benefit. All these home service contractors, many of them are complaining they can't get people to work for them, right? No one wants to work for me. I can't find any qualified people. And then you look at the branding, and that's problem number one. Do I want to wear a uniform from this particular company? Am I going to be proud to drive this truck with this particular brand? And so there's a lot of issues sometimes from a cultural standpoint, and the brand can help with that. The brand can really help deliver an environment that is more, endearing to a prospective employee. So that part too. So there's just, again, a lot of different things that you can sort of counter with that. And of course too, you have to remember there's ego involved too. So I designed it, my buddy designed it, my nephew designed it. They're attached to it. It's like their warm blanket. So I get that, but I'm going to tell it to you straight. Like, it's not going to work. It'll never work. It's really your call as to whether or not you want to proceed or not. So sorry, that was a really long-winded answer there for you, Michael.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, you're obviously doing like a lot of sign designs on every single day, but you get specialized to the trade. So like, was there any like applicable advice in Dan's book for like what you do? Like if somebody delivers you a sign and like, hey, here's the existing sign, and the brand that they're asking you to redesign that sign with, like you don't have a dog in that fight, do you? Because you're kind of removed.
I don't. Yeah, it's tricky for me because I'm standing on my client's shoulder. I'm not the one directly in front of the end user of that sign or whatever
the end buyer
it is that I'm designing. Right. Yeah. And 75% of the logos that I get that need to go on a sign are absolute garbage. I mean, they just are. There's no sugarcoating it. And, I try to push back and say like, is there an opportunity here to like, let's spend just a couple hours trying to, improve the look of this logo a little bit, not even like try and rebrand them. Let's just evolve their logo into something that doesn't look like it was made in Microsoft Paint 15 years ago. But, for me, no, like it's very, very hard to get anybody to be willing to do that because they don't want to go to their customer and say, hey, look, man, your brand is a pile of dog shit and you're about to spend, like I just designed a sign for somebody that's going to ticket at $150,000. And the logo was Times New Roman, italics, like, and of course I say, like, go have a conversation with your customer and tell them that, they're going to drop $150,000 on a sign with a Microsoft system font on it it's not going to accomplish the goal, which is brand awareness, what all signs are. So yeah, for me, it's an uphill battle and I used to lose sleep over it and anymore I just knuckle under. I'll give him my dog and pony show and say, listen, if you just, give me a few extra hours of time on this project, I can try and make this look better than what it does now and be more effective for your client. But ultimately it's their decision whether or not they're willing to do that or willing to pay us to do that or not. And 99% of the time they're not. And it's frustrating to me. I mean, I beat my head against a wall and like, we try to turn out the best possible sign designs you can, but at the end of the day, if the logo on that sign looks like shit, like the rest of the sign doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how well built it's built, no matter how it's lighted, none of that matters. And I think that, and Dan, you talk about this a bit in the book, there's zero barrier of entry for the sign industry, right? At least from a perspective, really. There's, like no matter how you cut it, like, if you got the money to buy a plotter and an HP, like you're in the sign business and there's, if you can pay the Adobe subscription every month, like boom, you're in business. Lack of education, lack of training, lack of any formal understanding that we're in the marketing and advertising business is just it's astounding to me how many people I talk to in this industry who don't recognize that that's the industry that they're in. They don't have any clue. Like you tell them, dude, you're in the marketing industry. You're not in the fabrication business. You're in the marketing industry, and that concept is sorely missing in this industry.
100%.
And I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that because I know it's probably something that you lose hair over as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's on some level it's sad. I think we owe a tremendous responsibility to the people that are tasked with us helping to grow their business. And so those parts seem just like, I don't know what the right word is. Is it sad? Yeah, I mean, it is sad. It also sort of angers me. I mean, when I see something out on the street that someone, maybe it's a small business, maybe it's like his last dollar that he spent on this, and it's just not going to work. And I think, design is not spoken about as much as it really should be within the industry. It's even like the training certifications. So you look at all the training certifications that exist in this world, and especially on the wrap side, and it's like, hey, we're going to be Avery certified, we're going to be 3M certified, and we've got a whole list of qualifications which tells the consumer that you know how to physically install a wrap. But yet there isn't one certification which actually qualifies you or signifies that you're able to actually design something that's effective, that's actually going to work. Who gives a shit how great the install is if the message is lost? Like, what point does that actually serve? But yet there is no certification, no governing body. There's nothing you have to go through that would signify that you are actually qualified to do this particular job. So it is what it is, I guess. I mean, I teach some wrap design. I go to trade shows. I try to talk about that. I also just try to use design for a sign shop as a means to distinguish themselves. So to me, you look at the pricing structure of wraps today versus where they were, 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, and the prices haven't adjusted to really reflect, first of all, the cost of doing business, and secondly, it's almost this race to the bottom as far as who can print and install at the lowest square foot possible. And so I like to look at design as a means to have a shop not be competing on price per square foot, but be competing on the value of the designs that they can provide. Like, as a consumer, I'll pay more for a design that's going to generate more revenue for me. Like, why wouldn't I? That would be stupid, right? But if I think shop A with the same certifications as shop B is 50 cents a square foot less than the other, well, I'll go with the cheaper one because my perception is they both provide the same exact thing. So how do you set the expectation that your designs are actually going to generate more revenue for them and be more successful in their endeavor, and use that as your positioning? Not that, oh yeah, we're 3M certified and we have the best qualified installers. Well, again, that's important. I'm not dismissing that importance, right? You got to have good installers, right? But the best installers is not going to fix a poor design. It's obvious.
I think that, like, in this industry, like, we talk about this a lot on the podcast, that a lot of people get into this business because they like to make cool shit. I mean, that's kind of like Bryant and I always say, like, I like to make cool shit. So the sign industry is a lot of fun. I got paid for it. We forget. Right. Yeah. So we get in that mindset where, like, we're so hyper focused on the making, what went into it. Like you said, the certification for the installation, how that, pylon sign is, framed up internally, and how it's engineered and how big, sign guys, we geek out on the technical side of things, right? The internals, the vinyl it's printed on, what kind of printer you used. So I think it's like inherent in just the type of people that get into this industry, that's what they focus on, and they assume that's what everybody cares about. And you're right, like, at the end of the day, no, there's no customer on the planet that really, at the end of the day, cares if it's printed on 3M or Avery or Oracle. They don't care if your cabinet's extruded or stick built. They don't care if it's a flex face or polycarbonate. Nobody gives a shit. They care what it looks like, what they see. All what you see is the only thing that the buyer actually really cares about. But the sign industry is so hell bent on selling the how that they overlook the why.
And and it's also just a commodity based selling. So we are selling a commodity. We're not selling a service. And if you flip that mindset and you start thinking more about the actual service of what you're providing versus your square footage price, it's a different mindset. And I get it. You need to know how much it will actually cost for you to print and install that wrap. Like, I get that part of it, but the value of what you provide, and there's, I mean, listen, there's shops that design is free. You get your truck wrap for free. Oh, we just bury those costs into the fees. Well, you've just buried the value now. Now the consumer sees there's actually no value in it because it's free. That makes no sense to me. Like, why would we put design fees for free and bury them into our cost per square foot? Then the consumer doesn't see there's any value in that as a separate entity. And then it just opens up another whole host of challenges when they want their logo. And, well, how do we charge them for that now? Because we did it for free, included in the wrap, and now they want all their logo file. Like, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh, hey, you're gonna take this work to somebody else, and now we're gonna charge you $2,000 to get all the assets and leave a sour taste in their mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see those posts on the Facebook groups all the time. Like, hey, I designed this logo for a customer a few years ago, and now they want all their assets. And they're always pissed about it. Like, what do I do? Should I charge them for it? Like, well, you should have fucking charged them for it up front.
That's why we have contracts.
Like, come on. Out of curiosity, like, say you've already got a brand designed and that's all established and everything. How many hours do you guys put into a van?
So,
like an average?
Yeah, I mean, on average, I would say that we hover around 40 to 50 hours total. And that there's a lot of steps involved in that process, but we budget approximately 40 or so hours for the logo by itself and about 20 hours for the wrap design. Sometimes we use the hours, sometimes we don't, but we have 5 full-time brand designers on staff. Our goal for each one of those brand designers is essentially 1 per week. So we're doing about 5 brand launches per week is roughly where we're at. Sometimes we're doing more, sometimes, maybe a little bit less, but that's kind of the goal that each designer has right now.
That's an incredible work rate.
It's a lot. I mean, the amount of work that flows through here is mind numbing. It's crazy, but it's, I want them to have the right amount of time to spend and not feel rushed. And I think that that's one of the things that the designers really appreciate is I'm not holding a gun to their head. They know what the expectation is as far as how much time that they can invest. And they don't want to put out crap work either. So I think they all appreciate the fact that that's a lot of time that you can invest on developing a brand. And, we usually pitch 2 or 3 unique concepts. So you'll have 3, customer usually has 3 solid ideas to pick from. We may have a favorite on there, but nonetheless, a lot of time is invested in that process. And you say, well, okay, most sign shops, they can't spend 40 hours on a design. And yeah, absolutely. And 10 years ago, I didn't spend 40 hours on a design either. Like, you know what I mean? So it's evolved for us to be able to, first of all, be able to charge the right amount of money where me spending 40 hours on it, I'm not losing any money on that endeavor. But I want guys to also understand and owners to understand that the first logo design that I sold personally was $25. Okay. So we all start somewhere, right? And then I raised it to 100 and then I raised it to 500. And then it was 1,000. And then I thought, oh my God, no one will ever pay more than 1,000. And then I raised it to 5,000. So it's along the way, we've perfected the craft and we've been able to invest more and more into the resources to developing really, really solid brands. But it doesn't happen overnight, but you all have to start somewhere, right? So if you're getting 500 today, terrific. Like invest in the marketing of that as a service, invest in how you present your work, invest in how you talk about the results that your work gets, and then make it 750 this year, and then make it 1,000. And there's a pathway to getting to where you want to go, but you've got to market it in a way that makes that customer understand the value. And you even look at guys that are like, that are really super efficient, that have been designing logos for a long time, and they can maybe bang something out that's halfway decent in 5 hours. And they think that, well, because it took me 5 hours, like I don't have to charge as much as it would have if it took me 10 hours. It's like, well, no, it took you 5 hours because you've got 10 years worth of experience. Why are you going to penalize yourself for being efficient, for being really good at your job? Like that never makes any sense to me either. It's like, well, no, charge the value of what it is, not what your hourly rate is, because your hourly rate now is a result of 10 years of experience. Like, so those little things also seem very strange
Mike,
to me.
Are you listening?
Dan and I are different businesses. I wish I could.
Yeah, we've talked about this before.
Adopt that. Bryant's always cheerleading me to charge more for my work, but the reality is my clients don't understand the value of my work, so I have to take what I can get. I've definitely pigeonholed myself into a weird niche in the industry that isn't as lucrative as it should be.
Yeah, we need to get you hooked up with the design firms and the architects and stuff, don't we?
Dan, I got a couple of follow-up questions here for you, just for our listeners, and just to touch back on something that Bryant was saying a little earlier about your book and how you specifically call out the return on investment for your clients.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to some of the ways that you go about reporting on some of the ROI of your current clients? Like if I'm a new client of yours,
mm-hmm.
and I'm in the plumbing business, and how can you talk to me about the value of what you bring and what type of data do you present to someone like myself with some of the other plumbing companies that you've worked with?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly became or has become a lot easier to have those conversations because we have so many examples. So we could say, hey, here's $1 million a year plumber that we rebranded 2 years ago. And right now they're at $4 million. And here's the things that we did to help him along the way. Now, I don't want anyone to think that just because you put a shiny new logo and brand out on the street, that suddenly now everything is rosy and that these guys are always going to kill it. You obviously have to have your operations down. You have to have all the right staffing, the right leadership. So I don't want to dismiss or discount
what the operation does, right?
Yeah, discount.
There still has to be best practices that they do in order to make it go to 4 million. But I guess where my question is more specific to how do you know that they did 4 million? Are you having those conversations?
Yeah, we have those conversations. Certainly in our kickoff and our briefing documents, we ask about current revenue size, how many employees they have. What are their particular challenges that they've been experiencing up until this point as it relates to revenue? And you could also see that if you judge like the years prior and you say, well, actually that company in Florida that I was talking about earlier, they were at 2.5 when we rebranded them, and it took them 9 years to get to 2.5. Okay, so steady incremental growth. Then we rebrand them, and they doubled, I think, in the first year, and now they're at over 13 million, right? So like it was
wow.
kind of going up, and then it was like boom. So it's like this inflection point, and all roads lead back to this change in culture, this change in brand, this change in marketing strategy. And so we know, again, they were doing well operationally, like all 5-star reviews, like great, leadership. But it just wasn't gaining any traction. Like people didn't know who they were. And now everyone in that community knows that particular brand. We did the tagline for them. We did this really unique story. And so I always like to say it is the inflection point for most of these businesses in that it really reshapes their trajectory in a positive way. And so when you ask too about, well, how are we getting these results or how do we ascertain them? That takes effort, right? So we reach back out to them 6 months later or a year later and say, what's the numbers? What are they looking like? And, oh, well, I was at 2 million last year and this year we're projecting to do 3.5. Well, terrific. And it's almost become like a weird thing, but it's like a badge of honor for them to actually be included on our website, to be on the page that talks about the revenue growth. Like they're so excited. Like, oh, dude, like I can't wait to get on there. Like, so they become like our biggest cheerleaders as well because they're really proud of that results. And sometimes they're friendly. A lot of them are friendly because they're all in the same groups, but they're like, oh, dude, I'm going to blow yours away, and they become like competitive.
Yeah. No, I love that. Man.
I love that. That you use your own website as like a means of like awards. I love that a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, just a quick question. We're all designers here on the call here today. I'm curious though. I mean, did you start out with the same philosophy? Did you kind of mold yourself into this? And who were some of those designers that you looked to, to establish this type of philosophy early on?
Yeah, I got into the industry as a sign painter. So I actually lettered my first home service truck. The first truck I ever lettered, hand lettered, was for a chimney repair company in Staten Island, New York, where I grew up. You may hear my little New York accent coming out a little bit here. So
Nah, get out of here. Really?
Yeah.
I started working doing lettering, and I was doing pinstriping and things like that. And I was so blessed. And I basically credit him in the beginning of the book with the sign painter that gave me my first job. I was 16 or 17 years old. I walked into his sign shop, and honestly, and this is how passionate I was about being in the industry. And I was like, dude, I'll sweep the floors. Like, I don't give a shit. I just want to be around this world. And he was an amazing sign painter, one of the most talented guys I know. He taught me so much about layout. So when we would do a truck, it adhered to these basic principles about legibility, about contrast, about priority. So I learned so much, just the physical aspect of hand lettering a truck and stepping back and looking at it and saying, oh yeah, okay, that doesn't have enough contrast, or that needs something to make it come forward a little bit more. So learning about priority, learning about foreground, background. So, I mean, I'm 17, 18 years old. Then I wanted to just be a sign painter. My parents like, no, like you should go to college. So I did go to college and I studied advertising. But all through college, I would come home and work in his sign shop. And so I kind of had the best of this world, like a structured formal education about how advertising and advertising design works. And then I had him like executing some of these things on these vans. And then I look at guys like Bob Honig, who is a sign painter, who's been in Signcraft for years. And he had a lot of, again, the same philosophy of using sometimes these super graphics on these vans. And they called them super graphics back then, but it was, again, a dominant element that had like a lot of punch. So you would see this dominant element, and then you'd have the name flanking it. And that repetition of that element is something that certainly you can look at our body of work and you'll see the roots of that, where we're working with kind of these super graphics and trying to really just hammer home something like really big, really unexpected, because it's more disruptive in that particular space. So I got really fortunate, the pathway that kind of led me to where we are. But I actually talked to him the other day because I sent him a copy of the book, and I thanked him because I'm so grateful for the opportunities that he gave me. But I said, like, dude, 30 years later, your fingerprints are still in almost every job that leaves this company. That's the impact that you've had on my career. And again, just so fortunate and blessed. And there's been others, you guys, the Jersey style lettering, which is really popular in the 80s and 90s, influenced me a bit. But I think as I evolved, when you mentioned earlier about you get into the sign industry because you want to do super cool stuff, I think a lot of my earlier work was more for my benefit than it was for my client's benefit. And probably about 10, 15 years ago, I started realizing that, diamond plate and tribal shit on the van, like, while it seemed super cool at the time, it's probably not really in their best interest. So I started evolving the idea that I didn't really care what other designers thought of my work. That wasn't who I was trying to impress anymore. But in the beginning, I feel like I was trying to impress other designers and other sign guys by doing really cool stuff. But now to me, it's more cool to see the results of the work that we do. And I think what I'm blessed with the team here is the idea that we know that our work has the ability to change lives, right? So if you accept that responsibility and that notion, then the work that you do will be reflected in that notion, right? So we know the results that we can get for our clients. We know that the task that they've given us is this enormous responsibility, right? We had a client that literally, she gave us her last $20,000 on a project that we had to do. That was it. She was all in. I didn't know at the time that had happened. I didn't know that was basically her all in. And we had to rename her and rebrand her and do her trucks and a few other things. And she is crushing it right now. She's doing $1 million a month in revenue 18 months after rebranding with us, when she was doing 30,000 a month before. So the numbers are just insane. But that's the kind of thing as far as that responsibility. Like, what if I fucked that up? Like, what if I screwed up that job? And now she's got like 25 people working for her. She has this most amazing culture, the most amazing environment. And oh my God, like we're so proud of that. Like we're so incredibly blessed to be able to have that impact on people. And I sort of went a little bit tangent on you guys, but definitely the experience I had working in a sign shop very early on with someone who mentored me and helped me understand so much about composition and values of layout. And just, I don't think I'd be here today without that experience.
So you talked about your team there a little bit. So how do you, what has been your secret to building that successful team, a team that is genuinely passionate and in love with what they do as much as you are? Because it's hard to find a team that cares as much as the owner or the boss does, right? Like everybody's there for a paycheck and they check out. How do you cultivate that? How do you?
I think we work so hard on culture here. We work so hard on trying to attract the best talent, and we treat them amazingly well. I think that when we think about who you complement your team with, as far as like my personal shortcomings, like I suck at illustration. Like I can't draw. Like I'm really good with typography, but you ask me to draw someone's face for a mascot, forget about it. Like it's not going to happen. Like I can't do that. But very early on, probably 20 years ago, I hired my first illustrator. And I used to do the type, and I would say, dude, give me like a little guy over here above the type. And he would sketch it out. And like, that's how we worked together. So I've just made a very conscious decision to surround myself with people that complement my own skill set. And I used to say that they were smarter than me, but it's not really a question of being smarter than me. It's just being better at a different skill set than I am. What can they add to the team that I'm not very good at? So even from a leadership perspective, I don't run day to day here anymore. I have someone else that runs day to day. I have someone else that does HR and payroll. I have people in charge of writers. I have people in charge of designers. So the part that I stay focused on is I stay focused on branding. So that's the part I love. That's why I got into this business. And I sucked at the other things. Like I sucked at trying to get payroll done. I sucked at trying to run operations here. And I don't want to do it. Like I'm not passionate about that stuff. But I've always just tried to surround myself with people that add value and complement my own skill sets. So like even the 5 illustrators that we have on staff, they're all stylistically different. They each kind of bring a different sort of flavor to the mix. And I think that that's really important too, because, we have one that's maybe really good at pictorial type of logos. And we have another one that's really good at more clean and simple logos. So like, I don't care what genre you need a brand or what genre you want to focus on. Like we have the right people to really try to do that. So if you're hiring, the idea of also just trying to make sure that the team that works under you feels valued, feels appreciated, and that you're taking care of them. It's not all about like how much money I can make. It's more about how much money can this company make that I can positively impact the people who work for me, that I can pay them better. I can give them better benefits. We can afford to do bonuses. We can afford to do trips. We can afford to like I pay for lunch, once a week. I pay for Dunkin' Donuts down the hall. So, I try to do some of those little tiny things, but they sort of add up. And from a cultural standpoint, I think we have a really strong culture. Everyone is really grateful to be a part of this team. So, again, just looking at your own shortcomings and not having the ego to say, to admit it. I mean, to be able to say, I suck at this. I really need to find somebody that's better at this than I am because I suck at it. And that's okay. Like I'm not pissed off that I suck at a lot of things. It's fine.
I freaking love that, man, because how many conversations have we had with guys, Mike, that are like reaching for something that they're just not going to do? Like, hey, I want to buy a franchise because it's going to give me the structure and make me do this. But if you're not a manager, like you're just not a manager. Like it's okay. That's not your personality. That's not your skill set. That's not your strength. But like trying to become one, you're going to hinder your business more so than like, hey, I should just find a good person who is a manager who has the skill set and bring them in.
And for me, like
ego.
I learned this as far as relying on the team and really trusting your team sort of the hard way. I had a heart issue 20 months ago where I actually had to have double bypass surgery. And
yeah, talk to us about that, man. Like what happened? Like what changes? Yeah.
Yeah. So for a guy racing bicycles for 20 years and 145 pounds and in amazing health, yeah, I had a heart issue. I had 2 blockages in my widowmaker and I had to have open heart surgery to fix it. And so I was laid up for a while. Like I don't recommend the surgery if you don't need to get it. But I had put somebody in charge of operations here before that even happened, not knowing that was on a horizon, but I wasn't really allowing them to assume that role properly. I was still involved in shit that I shouldn't have been involved in. And so now I'm forced with a scenario where I'm laid up. I can't really work. I can't really do anything. And I had to trust the team to really come through and they crushed it. I mean, and it was great for me because I was forced into that too. So now like there's so many things that happen on here that I have no idea what's going on. All I know is it's working. And so I'm just like, all right, cool. This is what you guys want to do. That sounds great. Just do it. So I've really learned to trust the team, to trust the process. And honestly, the numbers don't lie as far as like how much we've grown since I've stepped back actually from that role. So and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not pissed off at that. Like, it's not my ego saying, oh, well, I kind of sucked, I guess, and you guys are killing it. I'm like proud of that. I'm like, well, you know what? I got somebody that's doing this better than I was ever doing it. And that's awesome because we're growing so much faster now and we're doing so many more cool things. And that's fine. And I'm sitting in my corner and I'm super stoked that I can work on some logos and do that part of the part that I still like. But I'm not bogged down in the stuff that I wasn't good at, bottom line.
What was that like internally for you? Like being laid up and like for a guy who's super driven, obviously like you're very involved in the business and like suddenly not being able to like participate or be involved on that level. Like what did you go through like anything like emotionally or mentally during that time? Because like we don't talk about that enough. Like owning a sign shop, stressful business.
Yeah.
Stressful business. Custom order every time out of the gate. I had some guy in the past tell me like, hey, why don't you just clean carpets for a living? It would be a lot easier. You're going to make more money doing that. That's like,
I think, I mean, listen, honestly, when they wheel you into the OR and they cut you in half and stop your heart for 3-4 hours and do all this shit and patch you back up, you know, you really start, first of all, to recognize that everyone's time here is actually limited. Like we all have an expiration date. Like newsflash, like we're not going to all live forever, right? So you really start to think about that. But I think I approached the time afterwards with a deeper sense of gratitude. And it's not just gratitude for not dying, which obviously was kind of cool, but the idea that I live each day more appreciating the fact that I'm still here, the fact that I have an amazing team, the fact that I have a really cool business. And so from a personal standpoint, I look at that experience as literally the best thing that ever happened to me outside of my kids being born and my wife and things like that. But I'm so happy I went through that experience because I came out on the other side a different person. And you can't help but not be a different person having gone through that. But when you're faced with the idea that, you know, you have this expiration date, despite how healthy you may have thought you were, we all have this expiration date. And so I've just tried to live in a manner that is more grateful and thankful. So like today we had today we're having a Thanksgiving celebration here early, and we also gave out all the bonuses to all the employees today. And so that was like an opportunity again, just to express gratitude to them and that experience. Like, I just love that part of what we can do for our people. So, you know, the idea of just, you know, also living in the moment and recognizing that this thing that we have here, we also have this other thing called family and friends and that focusing on that as well. And I think I had sidestepped that a little bit during, you know, my career. You know, it's unfortunate, but we all could be doing more with our families and remembering that those are the things that are really important.
Everything in balance, 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that it naturally kind of leads us into a close, but you've got a captive audience of sign shop owners here. Like, you want to get on the soapbox for a minute? Like, gut punch these guys. Like, what advice would you give the sign shop owner now? Like, hey, listen to Dan. Like, he's going to tell you. Like, what advice would you give them at this point? Like,
I would say, continue to invest in yourself, continue to invest in learning this craft, educate yourself, and design as if lives are at stake with the work that you do. And I guarantee you it'll change your mindset and it'll change the way your company is perceived. Invest in marketing the services that you provide and distinguish your shop, and use design as a way to do that. Focus on the results that you get from clients. Talk to them about the results that you've got. Leverage those results. It takes effort to do the marketing of any design company. So whether it's a sign company or a design company, invest in having them understand the value that you bring to the table. And then again, to focus on cultivating talent and people that are enthused and excited about that. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that our team loves is, again, the fact that we're able to change people's lives and that our work affects people's lives. Like, we literally have out in the main area where everyone works, is we have a banner and it says our work changes lives. And it's got all like half a dozen case studies of revenue increases for all these different companies. So it's like a visual reminder of how important the work is that we do for our people. So if you approach it from that perspective and say, the responsibility that this business has given me is a sacred one, and I really need to make sure that I am delivering value, that I am educated on what I should be doing for them that would be in their best interest. And if you can become their biggest advocate, you'll build clients that will be loyal to you and that will become your biggest cheerleaders. Like, we don't advertise. Like, I don't pay to advertise, but every single person that goes through this process becomes our biggest cheerleader. So anytime someone posts something about rebranding, now I've got legions basically of super fans, and they love what we've done for them. And so if you can build, again, those legions of super fans, I think your business will grow. It'll distinguish yourself. But invest in yourself. You've got to be willing to invest in yourself. I mean, listen, there's not just my books, but there's books out there that can help you. Buy them, read them, study them. Like, understand consumer psychology, understand branding, understand legibility. Like, work on those things, and ultimately it'll benefit you.
Do you guys ever work with sign shop owners? Like, hey, I've got a client I will refer to you type of thing?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we absolutely do that. A lot of companies, they know the work that we do, and a lot of them are obviously trying to land some of the bigger fleet accounts, which we tend to live in when we do the rebrands and stuff like that. So we absolutely do work with other sign shops. Mainly we do that as a standalone endeavor. Like, I don't work through a sign shop. I'm going to work directly with the end user.
So they're making an introduction for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of a lot of shop owners that we talk to, maybe they know, okay, our current skill set is not being design first or super design oriented. How can we start shifting into this consultative approach? Hey, take up this mantle of, hey, we're really paying attention to the results that we're delivering for the client.
Yeah. And sometimes, like you said, they're not at that level, or they actually can't provide that service, but partner up with people who can and resell that services, or at least make the connection and work with that other company that's going to actually do the work. But if you're trying to get the larger fleet accounts, I mean, that's a way to sort of get into that world too, is, if you can do the design work for them and then you get the fleet account that goes along with it after.
Good point. Guys, Mike, Pete, any closing questions or thoughts?
Wow, this is really awesome. It's good to hear this directly from the horse's mouth, I guess. I hope people are paying attention to what Dan is saying.
I didn't hear Peter's keyboard, so I'm not sure if he took notes. Did you get a pen this time, Pete?
Still no pen. I'm still typing. I'm just muting my mic before my fingertips hit the keyboard. Okay. I apologize. Okay. To me, listen, Dan, it was really nice having you as a guest. I was really looking forward to hearing. I wanted to take a back seat and just listen. I believe in your philosophy. I wish that more shop owners believed in your same philosophy. If you haven't gone out, we haven't plugged his book yet, guys, so we got to plug his book. So if you haven't gone out,
from New Yorker to New Yorker, plug his book, Pete.
Yeah, man, for real. This was one of the best. To me, it's like a blueprint for how every wrap shop or how every sign shop needs to go about branding. And you heard some things from Dan here today. Personally, the ones that ring true for me, which I already knew, but for those of you that are, listening to this podcast, whenever you are listening to it, if your number is bigger than your brand, you got some problems. I love that. That was a really great just one line explanation as to just the fundamental error that we continue to see all over print shops, sign shop, wrap shops, where they just let the customer dictate what they want because they're the ones paying the bill. Whereas Dan's philosophy is, if you don't do it my way, then you're not my type of customer. And while we all don't have the power of firing customers because we need that revenue, that cash flow coming in, after reading this book, my interpretation is, if you're not believing in yourself, in your skills, you're not going to be a major player in this market. If you see yourself being a reputable sign company where your work speaks for itself, and you're charging by the square foot, and you're using vendors that are, like you said earlier, the race to do it the cheapest, you're upside down with some of the ways that you're thinking. You need to start thinking more towards generating ROI for your customers, because that's what they're buying. That's what they're investing in. If it's your designs that get them there, that's what you need to be focused on. And that's where kickcharging your home service brand, or doesn't necessarily even need to be home service, right? I would think, Dan, that's your forte, but it just goes for any type of business.
Yeah, it's any vertical for sure.
So if you haven't checked it out right now, Dan, tell our listeners where they can get your book from.
So you can get it through our website at kickcharge.com/books. BOOKS, or you can get it on Amazon. If you get it through our site, it's actually a little bit cheaper than Amazon, and I will personally autograph it, and it'll be worth hundreds as soon as I die. So you'll have that going for you, which is nice.
Very nice. Very nice. Dan, super glad to have you on. If anyone listening is interested in becoming a guest on the podcast, hit us up at hey@bettersignshop.com. That's it for today. Yeah, I don't think we have any other calls to action. Man, this was a good one. Dan, I appreciate you taking the time out. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate being on. Take care, guys.
Dan.
If you liked this episode, make sure you hit subscribe to get all the latest episodes. And check out our website, bettersignshop.com. Get free resources and helpful tools on growing your shop. Thanks for listening.